Welcome back. It used to be the safari destination of Hollywood stars, but Gorongosa's wildlife was decimated during Mozambique's long civil war, and the camps destroyed by bombs and bullets. Now a dot-com millionaire from the Rocky Mountains has a new dream for this national park.
For some, it was the best of times. For the true wildlife enthusiast, it was one of Africa's premier destinations, Gorongosa National Park, and it was hot on the tourist circuit. Portuguese-ruled Mozambique in the 60s was far more than the Polana Hotel and prawns on the beachfront.
Gorongosa National Park, a wildlife paradise, the playground of Hollywood stars like Gregory Peck and John Wayne. It was referred to as the sanctuary of the species, and the Portuguese called it the place where Noah left his ark.
But the Gorongosa of recent years has suffered. The wildlife that quite literally covered the plains has been drastically reduced, with the grass growing tall and little game to graze it.
If we can restore the ecosystem of Gorongosa, then we will be helping biodiversity, we'll be helping nature and so forth, but also we will create a lot of employment.
Wealthy American philanthropist Greg Carr has plans to restore this former Mozambican jewel.
We're standing where there was a wonderful little restaurant. People would come here, have lunch. You could watch elephants coming to one side of the lake and drinking, a herd of buffalo come to the other side of the lake and drink. It was just tremendous.
Game was bountiful and the landscape was dramatic. Tourists sipped cocktails while watching wildlife from verandas. It was the thrill of wild Africa.
I've seen, herds of more than 5,000 buffaloes together.
Baldeo Shunde is the warden at Chitengo, the main camp in Gorongosa. It was here in the mid-70s that Shunde began his career as a ranger.
You couldn't go out and without seeing, let's say thousands of animals.
This footage, shot by South African tourists in the 60s, reveals remarkable wildlife activity, including what became known as the Lion House.
The lions have taken them over, and one pride actually lives in them and gets on top of this, which used to be the restaurant, by climbing up the fire escape in the back, and from there they can survey right across the plain.
We'll certainly no lions here these days. Apparently they used to climb up the spiral staircase. Now there's a ladder which they could probably still handle.
But in the 60s, the scent of independence was in the air, and the Mozambican liberation movement, Frelimo, was about to launch its fight for freedom. João Viziu worked in Mozambique throughout the war years.
Actually, just across the landing strip, they attacked the camp, Chitengo. This way we stand used to be the restaurant and the bar just across the road. They just attacked and they left, but the tourism was full of tourists. And from there on, this camp started to lose all the tourists.
In 1976, Frelimo won the fight against Portuguese rule. But Mozambique's troubles were only just beginning.
Mozambique's long civil war ended the days of paradise. The park was closed in 1982 after a couple of attacks, and Gorongosa became one of the main battlefields between the government and the Renamo rebels.
Fumo Nkoronera is the headman of Vinho village, just outside Gorongosa's Chitenga camp. The gun battles are stored deep in his memory. Control of the park changed hands several times between government, Frelimo forces and Renamo, and poaching became the order of the day. But the worst of it happened in the years right after the war, in 1992.
We were trying to find out what is remaining in Gorongosa. And unfortunately, we did find out that in Beira town, some people, they were running butchers, to sell game meat, which most of it was coming from Gorongosa. And that, we're not talking, about small amounts of meat.
It was almost impossible to control what was going on. There were helicopters involved, all kinds of land vehicles involved.
With over 10 years' experience in Mozambique, Professor Richard Balefus is Gorongosa's chief ecologist.
For a brief period, you'd have to say more or less a lost cause when the animals really went down rapidly.
So it was a slaughterhouse for a few years.
It was, yeah.
After the war, the government struggled to defeat the poachers and get Gorongosa back on its feet. It was also trying to reconcile former enemies. And Shande set about hiring his game rangers from both sides. Renamo and Frelimo.
Given the history of Gorongosa and the country, was there a lot of tension when these former fighters were suddenly thrust together?
The guys, coming from Renamo and the guys coming from Frelimo, both they were having fears. And then I ended up having, 4 bodyguards, 2 from Renamo and 2 from Frelimo. And they were all guarding me, so I couldn't have, my private life, easy until, after 3 months I said, this is over.
But there was tension at first.
Yeah, very much tension, yeah. So I had to bring up, all those people into, a common objective. And I think I achieved that, yeah.
But reconstituting a national park and the local economy was a massive task, and the money simply wasn't there.
And just when some thought that paradise could be lost forever, a wealthy American from a small town in the Rocky Mountains fell in love with Gorongosa and decided to use his foundation to breathe new life into the park.
Greg Carr made his fortune by developing telephone voicemail in the dot-com boom period of the 90s. He's the new breed of philanthropist, someone who wants to be involved with the money he donates. Top of his mind is the environment, the park, and the population within it.
I was really wondering, what can I do to be useful? What can I do that would serve those 2 missions, supporting the environment, but also supporting a humanitarian effort?
We've got a 20, 30-year plan to turn this place around, both from a social perspective, bringing back the communities around the park, and bringing back the wildlife that was here back to its former glory.
Carr was on a mission. He made plans to supplement the park's existing game population with species from South Africa's Kruger Park. He knew that by getting Gorongosa running efficiently, the surrounding economy could be stimulated. And to be made attractive to the tourist, the park's facilities had to be rebuilt.
This is the main camp at Chitengo. It lay in ruins after the war. The huts and the main buildings bombed in air raids, the walls crumbling and covered with bullet holes.
Where we had that first attack, saw 3 bullet holes in this wall. President Samora Machel ensured that this wall was kept for posterity by putting a fence around it. So the plan now is to turn this restaurant and bar into a conference center that seats 75 people. We will want to frame this wall, which is going to be the remembrance wall, as it stands. But let me show you the plans that we have.
Vizu speaks of over 100 beds at Chitengo, catering for both big foreign spenders and ordinary Mozambicans. It's a model to be replicated at 3 other locations in the park. The project speaks of long-term work opportunities and income generation.
A big focus of our project is improving the lifestyles of the communities around the park. We're doing that.
A year ago, a bicycle was an unusual sight in neighbouring Vineyard village. Today, they are commonplace. A clinic and school has also been built in the village, and the 500 locals employed are acquiring essential skills.
We make these bricks locally.
They're getting trained in all kinds of things, conservation education, malaria prevention, and then they go back and they're actually vectors, if you will, into their communities. They go in and we work with their friends, their neighbors, their families.
It's amazing that some of the children in this area may not have shoes, but they'll soon have wireless internet.
We have been putting wireless internet into schools around here. We're building elementary schools, but we're also building in some of the towns just a computer center. Can you imagine the self-esteem that comes to a young child who feels, wow, I have the same opportunity to gain knowledge as somebody in Europe does?
For the village headman, it's something of a dream come true. But to make this massive project work, the park needs tourists. Mike McNamara, a veteran of the tourism industry in Zimbabwe, has been tasked with developing suitable activities in the park.
It's like a blank canvas. Literally you sit down with the team, and Greg's got a big and very qualified team here, and sort of brainstorm, and anything's possible. You literally have a look at what you'd like the park to be like in 30 years and you try and work towards that.
Mike, what activities do you see for tourists here at Gorongosa?
Gorongosa's got such an incredibly diverse ecosystem, from sort of montane forests right up on the top of the mountain down to just above sea level, the Pungwe River systems. We've got the gorges on the Chengam escarpment. So literally, if you can think of it, we can then test to see whether it's environmentally friendly and we can do it or not.
And quad bikes top of the list? No.
For those who think they've heard the story before, sustainability is built into every aspect of the project, even the planned International Research Centre.
We've got quite a few young Mozambican scientists coming up through the ranks. We're working on this project to train people up and then to fill all our positions with Mozambicans over time. So my goal is to get to where, for example, this International Research Centre will be self-perpetuating part of Mozambican park culture here and will carry on.
Greg, you're putting in a sizable amount of money. Could end up being, what, $40 million US dollars. Do you hope to recoup some of that?
Well, our arrangement with the government of Mozambique is that there's a provision in the contract we call handback. And so once everything is sustainable, we hand the park back to the government and they fully manage it. Even now, they're involved in management. We're doing it together.
There's a lot at stake with this park, more than just conservation and more than just communities. It's kind of a unifying place for the country where a lot has happened in the last 40 years and a lot of healing can happen as well.
You seem very excited about this project.
Extremely excited. I can see this being the last project of my life.
This project has been more than I could have dreamed. And I cannot imagine having done something that I would like better.
After the ads, we're taken on a musical journey from District 6 to the Abbey Road recording studios. The chances are that Trevor Jones has already influenced your life. Bunking school to go and watch movies is hardly a recipe for success in later life, especially when you're growing up amidst poverty and there are not too many opportunities when you are classified as non-white. The story of Trevor Jones reads like a movie script, so why don't we go to the movies?
Hi.
Hi. When you've got Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts in the classic Notting Hill, they meet